Hello, hi Facundo. I'm here to do your reading today. First of all, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and I sincerely apologize if I am not. But anywho, you requested a Celtic Cross reading from me, and your question was essentially a career question because you told me about your very impressive resume there, and basically how. Um, Through some unfortunate circumstances, I guess, that you had to kind of abandon a certain path that you were taking in terms of your science career, and how you're kind of wondering what to do with yourself next, and what the next step is for you as you kind of shift gears, it seems, into a new career path. Excuse me. So we're going to see what we've got here for you today. Today I am going to use the Tot Tarot. I haven't been using it lately for readings on here, but I thought, why not today? And your significator, you told me you were a Virgo male, and so the Virgo male in the tarot is the Knight of Discs, so we're going to use the Knight of Discs for you as your significator. And as always, I have already invoked, already shuffled, and we're going to see what you've got. So, overall situation is represented by adjustment. How fitting. Crossing you is the Eight of Pentacles. Crowning you is the Prince of Swords. And grounding you is Death. And in the past, and as always, these are big cards, so I'm going to try to make it as best as possible for you to see. No guarantees. In the past is the Priestess, and in the future is the Ten of Swords. Perspective is the universe. Exterior influences the Six of Swords. Hopes and fears, Eight of Wands. And overall outcome is the Ace of Swords. I'm going to put that there. And bottom card is the Prince of Discs. Okay. Excuse me. Well, you do have a lot of swords here. You sort of have a clustering of swords and mental activity. And I can see that most of this is culminating in this decision that you are still kind of in the process of making. It says you haven't really made up your mind yet at all, because the overall situation is adjustment, and adjustment is power arrested in the process of decision, basically, not having necessarily acted out its course yet. And the reason for this is because of death. You have let go of the path that, well, you've let go of, I want to say you've let go of what made sense to you, and you've been, excuse me, you've been forced to basically lose a key part of yourself, and I don't know that that's a great thing. Because I see, before we even get to the obstacle card, you're in the past, you have the Priestess, and the only card that resonates with throughout your whole spread that I can see is Death, in your root position. And for me, it seems that what that's telling me is that you have, in some way, either by choice or otherwise, you have discarded one of your guiding principles. And I think that is what has left you so confused in some ways. I don't know if you really can know where you're going, because you have supposedly, gotten rid of your guiding light in some ways. I think that, what you were doing before was the right career choice for you, and was right for you because it matches best with your personality. I think the Priestess really is evident to me that, your past situation was more in alignment with what you're supposed to be doing, and that whatever hiccups you experienced were not necessarily intended to derail you off of that path. Now, I realize that what you are kind of focused on right now with the block is the 8 of discs, and I am kind of interpreting that as you having difficulty building something back up. Um, that basically you're trying. I also get the sense that you're a very practical person, being a Virgo, and with the Prince of Discs on the bottom, I think that you are a hardworking individual. Um, you like to stick with one thing, and I think that you feel like you have to shift entirely towards something totally new and build that back up from scratch. And I don't know that that's really the case. Um, let's see. What's interesting is your perspective on the situation is the universe or the world. And it seems to me that you almost feel like you have expended all of your options. Sorry, allergies today are awful, and my neighbor is cutting his lawn, which I hope is not bothering you. But this setup tells me that you almost feel like everything is done, like you've done everything that you possibly can do, and that there's nothing left for you to do besides switch gears entirely. And I think that what the Prince of Swords in your crown position is telling you is that that is not necessarily the case, and that I think you need to think a little bit more richly in a way. Your thought process needs to be a little more abstract and a little more idealistic, I think, because the Prince of Swords is Aquarius, and the star is associated with Aquarius, and so I almost think that really is representative of being opposite to the universe. However, the universe does rule Aquarius, which is interesting, as Saturn. Um, and so there is a connection between those two cards there, and with adjustment as well. Libra also being ruled by Saturn to some extent, or Saturn is exalted in Libra, whatever. Same difference, right? And basically, those three cards, I think, are talking about the mental process that you're going through right now. And I think the Prince of Swords is your advice card, is telling you to think a little less limitedly, I guess, and to think a little more open-mindedly, because the Prince of Swords is all about generating ideas and not necessarily practically pursuing any of them, and not necessarily being good at carrying them out. But I think it's saying that as far as advice is concerned, you need to tap into that energy a little bit more, and to expand your thought process in some way. In some way, your thought process has become limited, and I think you need to open that up a little bit more. Okay, now in your immediate future, you have the Ten of Swords, and this is not necessarily a great card. I think it's going to continue to be difficult for you in the immediate future. I think especially as you try to rebuild totally from scratch. Um, yeah, the 8 of discs is connected to your 10 of swords here, because they're both ruled by the sun, and so that's telling me that the block of rebuilding is going to continue to give you a headache, and it's going to feel like you have no foundation to start from. But the reality is you do. You do have a. Oh no, sorry. You do have a foundation to start from, and you I think that foundation is something that you have sort of let go of more easily than you necessarily need to. Um, and again, that's just going back to the whole priestess thing. And maybe what's interesting is that the priestess represents the moon, which is opposite to the Ten of Swords. And so whatever energy the Ten of Swords represents, the priestess represents its opposite. Okay? And the priestess is more firm in a way. You know, she has more grounding. So whatever that energy is of the priestess, you know, that core principle that you used to follow, I think we need to try to regain that for you, and we need to think of ways to take that core principle and expand it into different options for you, so that you aren't faced with this sort of black and white decision that is proving problematic for you. Okay? Now, your exterior factors are represented by the Six of Swords over here. So, you know, at the same time, it seems that overall life is not necessarily. I don't want to say that it's all bleak, just because the Six of Swords does tend to represent, you know, moving away from difficulty to some extent, and sort of finding a reprieve from anxiety and difficulty. And so I think either, you know, people around you don't see you as all that stressed. Maybe you're just kind of a cool as a cucumber kind of guy. Um, but I think that, you know, also there, the Six of Swords is telling me also that, you know, there are opportunities that you are looking at in your environment for career path and career opportunities. Um, but you know, this is connected to this again. You know, it's sort of like a lot of this is leading back to this Eight of Discs here, and this Mercury sentiment here. Mercury is really is kind of dominant in your reading, because you have the 8 here, which is representative of Mercury, and is Virgo, which is also ruled by Mercury technically. And this is Mercury, and this being an 8 is also Mercury. So you have this kind of triad of Mercury that I find interesting. Um, and all of those three cards, you know, the Eight of Wands, which is also double Mercury with Mercury and Sagittarius. Yeah, you've got an awful lot of Mercury here, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think that it emphasizes this mental workout that you're putting yourself through. And hopes and fears, represented by the Eight of Wands, seems to me that you hope that this is going to resolve itself kind of quickly. And yeah, I mean, the Eight of Wands for me always seems to represent like a rush to do something. You know, you want something to happen quickly, you want it to be over with quickly, and you want it in some ways to be a little easy. You know, if I were to interpret it more as a fear, then it would be much the same thing. That, you know, opposite of that being, you know, you're afraid of making quick and rapid progress, but it blowing over too soon or something like that. But I don't know. I might have to come back to that. Let's see what else we've got here. I want to say you are lacking in fire in this, and I think you need more fire, because you've got a fair amount of everything else. I think you need more fire in this situation, and I'm so sorry, my allergies. And I think the Eight of Wands is representative of that, of whatever fire you're lacking. I think you need what you need here from this, or what you want, is just some kind of springboard in a way, to get yourself moving again, to get yourself taking action again, because I do think that adjustment has you feeling very stuck. Um, I think that the Ten of Swords in your immediate future, too, which I failed to mention, uh, that the message inherent in the Ten of Swords, as always, really is that, even when we think things are at their bleakest or at their lowest point, there's always a kernel of potential contained in them that is redeemable, and that is, you can grow it. It is not necessarily all gloom and doom, and it isn't all destruction. Even when things seem most destroyed, life can still spring from them. And I think that that is partially what the Ten of Swords is trying to say, especially given your overall outcome as the Ace of Swords. I see the overall outcome being a big shift away from the Ten of Swords, which, for me represents, in your case, clutter and confusion continuing for you, and also just feeling of ruin and desolation, and perhaps not finding it easy to focus on the positive here. But I think, eventually you're going to come to a point where you have the right idea that you need, just so that you can see a little bit more. Again, overall outcome is the Ace of Swords. So I see you going from all this clutter to much more clarity and simplicity, and having a realization, a viable realization about a choice you can make that can actually produce some better results for you. So I think, you're eventually going to make your decision. The light will come to you, and it's going to make sense eventually, but how soon from now is not clear necessarily. Um, I think that, you're going to come to that realization the sooner that you follow this advice that we had mentioned for the Prince of Swords, and also, like I was saying at the beginning of the reading, tap back into the intuitive side of your brain, and think about what it is your heart really wants. That really is important. And think about how the previous situation that you've had to go through was somehow not quite right for you, and how can you try to look for a situation that is more right for you. And part of that comes from knowing yourself better, and understanding what you need, to be successful here. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know that switching gears entirely again, is quite right. I don't fully know the situation. I mean, you've given me sort of the bare bones of it, but if there are indeed other options, as it seems to suggest that there are, I think you need to do some serious brainstorming, and maybe not be afraid to take a risk, or listen to your intuition more. I really think that that is what is missing here. Because of death, you've let it go, and without, the priestess and adjustment are very intricately connected, and a lot of people always say that, and it is true, because adjustment really does not function without the influence of the priestess. Both of them represent much the same thing, because they both are representative of the of truth in various forms. The priestess is truth in a sort of passive way, in a more benevolent sort of just bestowing of gifts kind of way, whereas adjustment is more active. It's truth in action and being used in action. And so I think for you to be able to make this decision most effectively, you need to stay true to yourself above all things, and not necessarily discard what was true to you simply because it didn't necessarily work one time. Because if it didn't work, then it wasn't quite right for you, and it wasn't meant to be. But your your resume is so tremendously impressive, and it clearly is something that you've worked very hard on and put a lot of effort into. And I don't know that it's right for you to just abandon all that. That seems very sad to me, and I would strongly encourage you, just as a person, to not let go of that necessarily, and to try harder to think of ways you can make it work, because there have to be ways you can make that work. There have to be. I think you just need to think a little more on it, and and try to think about it with that guiding principle there. Um, Especially, your bottom cards, to continue reading through that. Bottom four are very strong. You've got Prince of Discs again, and Lust, which tells me that this is something, your work is something that you are very passionate about. Beneath that, you have the Knight of Cups. You are an idealist when it comes to this field that you've chosen, and I don't think you should necessarily lose sight of that. Um, I think you should be pursuing your highest ideals when it comes to your career choice. And I think that you just need to continue pursuing them. Underneath the Knight of Cups is the Chariot, which tells me that, there is the potential here for you to overcome the difficulties and trials that have been placed before you. Oftentimes in life, we get our guiding principle or whatever tested and pushed, and um, all sorts of things are brought into our lives to challenge that principle, that which we think is true. And the reason for this, I don't think, is necessarily to confuse us or to hinder us, but I do think that they're there to challenge us and to really force us to fully evaluate those things and those decisions and that truth, so that we really know for sure that that is our truest true, and I think we need to have you do a little bit more of that, and to think of this situation a little more positively. So I hope that this makes sense. This reading was a little vague in places, I realize, um, but I hope it makes sense. That's what it's saying to me. If this does not make sense to you, please let me know. And if you have any questions, any feedback, I'd love to hear it. And that's about all I can get. I think it ends positively. That's the overall best thing here, is that the Ace of Swords tells me it ends positively. But I think you might be able to shorten the time between then and now a little bit more if you, take this advice and try to let it germinate. All right. So I wish you the best of luck. I really do. I hope that things get better for you rather than worse. I definitely do. And I think, things will eventually look up for you. All right. Thank you so much for your purchase of a reading. Appreciate it as always. And I hope that this was helpful for you. Okay. Thank you very much. And bye-bye.